Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions. And that how it holds up today is probably going to be the key element of this one, because today we are talking all about the Temple of Doom, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Before we get into that, a little bit of housekeeping. If you like what you hear, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. So continuing on in our month of Indiana Jones, we have Logan Wilkinson joining us. How you doing, Logan?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm doing great.
Excellent. And Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cam?
Kalima!
Kalima, indeed. Yes, Temple of Doom. Today, now our second entry following last week's Raiders of the Lost Ark. Why do we pick it? Of course, because we are doing all of the indie movies this month, which will, lead up nicely to Dial of Destiny coming out to theaters. So yeah, we're hitting that SEO train. Hooray!
Love it.
So we will continue on with our history lesson here. Originally released May 23rd, 1984. This will be the last of the series that predates any of us being born, because by the time the next one rolls around, I will be alive. And I think somebody else might also be alive by the time the next one comes around. Yeah.
You're 90 or 89, Cameron?
Cameron's 89, yeah.
Yeah, so potentially depending on when it comes out.
Yeah, I guess I think it comes out like summer of 89, so
it
predates Cameron
me.
Still, yeah.
Just by a few months.
But I'll be alive for Last Crusade. Other releases of the time here in 1984.
I love it. I love the 80s ones.
We have Splash, came out March 9th, 1984, the namesake for the now closed Splash Mountain, because Michael Eisner's a weird guy who was like, we have to brand this Songs of the South ride with Splash because that's our big movie from this year. Following that, we had Police Academy, the first Police Academy, March 23rd. Following up last week, we had like Friday the 13th, Chapter 2. Here we have Friday the 13th, the final chapter on April 13th. Spoilers, it wasn't the final chapter. We had the John Hughes classic, and also somewhat problematic in hindsight, 16 Candles on May 4th. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom here.
First of the Hughes trilogy with Molly Ringwald, or is that?
I believe so. I don't remember actually, because
I know Breakfast Club is the last one.
Yeah, it might have been Pretty in Pink first. I don't know.
I think it was Pretty in Pink first, then 16 Candles,
and then Breakfast Club. Okay.
You know what's an easy way to rectify
Three of us
this?
have the internet at our disposal in 2023 here.
Yeah, Pretty in Pink, 1986. So no, 16 Candles was first, then Pretty in Pink, and then presumably the Breakfast Club.
Cool.
I'm guessing Breakfast Club came out after that.
Yeah, that would definitely.
Breakfast Club was 85. So Breakfast Club was the middle chapter. So 16 Candles, Breakfast Club, but then Pretty in Pink. Huh. There we go.
I think it's because I think it's because Molly Ringwald's character is so mature in I don't know. Yeah. Actually, 16 Candles, she's really mature as well because she deals with but
definitely not Pretty in Pink. She definitely feels the youngest now. Yeah. That's why that's interesting.
I've only seen Breakfast Club of the three. So
Breakfast Club is fantastic. If you have to see one, make it that one.
I know
that's definitely the best one to watch for sure. Certainly the most iconic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then we had Temple of Doom here on May 23rd, followed a week and change later by Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. But following up a pretty iconic Star Trek movie that came out June 1st, and then we had Ghostbusters June 8th, as well as Gremlins June 8th. That was a busy weekend for the iconic 80s. Greg Miller and the iconic 80s cinema. The Karate Kid came out June 22nd.
Hell yeah, it did. What a great run.
We talked about Cannonball Run in the last episode. Cannonball Run 2 came out June 29th. And similarly, we had the Muppets Great Caper, I believe. The Muppets Caper. Great Muppets Caper was last time around. Muppets Take Manhattan came out July 13th this time around. I will say after kind of the very hit and miss box office mojo results last week, I have consolidated. I'm not gonna like the numbers are very iffy, but
sure.
so I'm not gonna go through domestic and worldwide. We're just gonna look at worldwide gross because I imagine that's probably the more reliable number. So worldwide gross of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom was $179.8 million, which was down from the $212 million of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Makes sense.
Nowadays, that would be about $527.5 million adjusted for inflation. So with some of those other names thrown out there, where do you guys think this landed worldwide gross-wise?
I mean, it's Raiders.
Is Ghostbusters PG or R?
Ghostbusters?
PG, right?
I believe was PG. I mean, this one of the trivia things is obviously like PG-13 doesn't come about until later, and it comes about because of this movie and Gremlins.
And Gremlins.
So yeah, Ghostbusters, which came out a week later, would have also been PG still.
PG, presumably, right? Okay. Yeah, I mean, out of these movies that we're seeing, I would say Ghostbusters and Karate Kid are the only two that I can see beating Temple of Doom, especially worldwide. 84. There's not a Bond movie that Trevor didn't put in.
The Star Wars. Next one was the following year,
View to a Kill.
85. Yeah, View to a Kill.
Star Wars had ended the year before, so there's nothing from that. Superhero movies don't exist, basically.
I think it's number one across the board.
Yeah, I would say it's number one across the board, and then I would say Ghostbusters or Karate Kid are probably the ones that follow it. Because it's such a weird. I mean, how big is 16 Candles? I guess, but it was like I'm gonna say it's number one. I agree with Cameron. Maybe Police Academy. I could see throwing like a wrench in it.
All right. So I did confirm Ghostbusters was PG. So looking here, number 10 was Splash. Just outside the top 10 was Purple Rain, which is also, I think, falls like just outside of the time frame that I looked at here.
I love the 80s so much.
Splash was number 10 with a worldwide gross of about 70 million. Star Trek Search for Spock was number 9 with 76.4 million. Romancing the Stone was number 8 with 76.5 million. Footloose was number 7 with 80 million. Police Academy was number 6 with 81.1 million. The Karate Kid, number 5 with 90.8 million. Then we get a jump up to Gremlins at number 4 with $148.1 million.
Big jump up, yeah.
Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom was number 3, $179.8 million.
So yeah.
Ghostbusters, $229.2 million at number 2. And number 1, Beverly Hills Cop with Eddie Murphy.
Oh, Beverly Hills Cop came out that year. Yeah, that's definitely going to be number 1.
Yeah, beat Ghostbusters by $5.5 million at the worldwide box office, $234.7 million.
I mean, that's what I thought. Ghostbusters was huge. Okay.
Yeah. Ghostbusters definitely huge. Massive. Indiana Jones obviously took a bit of a dip in their second outing there. But yeah, then the Eddie Murphy Beverly Hills Cop vehicle took the world by storm. So, all right. So yeah, that was number 3 in the worldwide gross that year. Our runtime here, 1 hour and 58 minutes. In the Lucasfilm timeline of things, we had Raiders of the Lost Ark had come out in 1981, Return of the Jedi 1983, as well as Twice Upon a Time in 1983. Then Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom here in 1984. 1985 would bring Latino and Mishima, A Life in 4 Chapters, followed by Labyrinth and Howard the Duck in 1986. And then 1988 had Willow. Our roll call, we continue on once again with Steven Spielberg, so I won't run through all of his stuff, but of course he was the director of the last one as well, having done stuff like Jaws, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, E.T. the Extraterrestrial by this point, and then would do Color Purple, Hook, Jurassic Park, Schindler's List, and a whole bunch of other stuff.
He's Steven Spielberg.
Yeah, of course. Our writers here, George Lucas continued with the story by credit for this one. Obviously, of course, having done American Graffiti and Star Wars. but the new writing duo this time around was the writing pair of Willard Hoyk and Gloria Katz. They had been the writers for American Graffiti. They did Temple of Doom here, and then they would go on to write Howard the Duck as well. So that was their most notable little lineage there.
Is that movie on Disney Plus?
Howard the Duck?
Yeah.
I don't believe so.
Good.
I mean, it might be.
Howard the Duck shouldn't be on any platform. That's a messed up.
Yeah, I feel like if anything, Disney would throw that on Hulu, but I don't know.
With all its other redheaded stepchild shows.
Yeah, kind of.
It does not look like it's on Disney Plus.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. Leah Thompson in that one, though. So, of course, starring once again Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones. We talked about last time around, American Graffiti, Star Wars, go on to be in Blade Runner, Patriot Games, Fugitive, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Kate Capshaw here as Willie Scott. Prior to this, she had been in the film, the film or the series, I don't remember which now, The Edge of Night. After Temple of Doom, she would go on to be in Dreamscape, Black Rain, and Just Cause, which is not any kind of relation to the video game. It was I want to say a thing in the 90s. She didn't have a ton of a continued film career, but obviously she did marry Steven Spielberg out of this, so she didn't really need to be an actress much anymore.
Update, looks like Howard the Duck is on Amazon Prime for streaming.
Of course, we also get the debut here of Ke Huy Quan as Short Round. It was also weird because I knew from this era he went his stage name was Jonathan, and so when I saw an introducing Ke Huy Quan, I was like, did they change the opening credits of this to give him his proper name back? But no, he was originally credited as Ke Huy Quan here. Yes, of course. Here in Temple of Doom, also the following year in The Goonies, go on to be in Encino Man, as many memes made the rounds last year with him and Brendan Fraser. And then, of course, most recently won the Academy Award for Everything Everywhere All at Once, Best Supporting Actor. He can also be currently seen on Disney Plus in American Born Chinese, and he will be making his debut in the Marvel Cinematic Universe in the second season of Loki coming up later this year.
I did not know that. That's so cool. Also, I didn't know that he was an American Born Chinese. I'm going to have to watch that now.
Yep. It's a nice little reunion with him and Michelle Yeoh.
Oh, awesome.
Yep. Amrish Puri as Molaram. He's an Indian and Asian cinema credits going back to 1967. A couple years before this, he had been in the Ben Kingsley Gandhi. After Temple of Doom, he would go on to have many, many additional roles until his death in 2005, including a couple of posthumous roles released in 2006 and 2008.
An icon of Bollywood cinema. Huge. Pretty much always plays a bad guy, which he does very good.
That's one of the things in trivia I saw was basically he showed up on set with the shaved head for this, and everybody was so intimidated by him that he kept it, and it became kind of his trademark in the Bollywood scene.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Roshan Seth as Chatar Lal had also been in Gandhi prior to that. Afterwards, of course, Temple of Doom. He was Dalsim in the 1990s Street Fighter. He was also in the film Proof, based on a play of the same name. He was in The Cheetah Girls One World. And most recently, or not, I guess he's probably had a couple other credits in this, but he was in the 2019 Dumbo live action remake. Philip Stone as Captain Blumbert. He was in a trio of Stanley Kubrick films, and I believe one of the little trivia things I found was he's the only person who's been in 3 back-to-back Kubrick films in Clockwork Orange, Barry Lyndon, and The Shining. He was also going to be in Flash Gordon, and then ultimately Temple of Doom. Roy Chow as Lao Che, the Chinese actor with credits going all the way back to 1950s. And then after Temple of Doom, he was also in the another iconic 80s film, Bloodsport. David Yip as Wuhan. Prior to after Temple of Doom, he would go to be in A View to a Kill.
Hell yeah!
I threw in there for
Pegged
the
him
Bond
immediately.
reference.
He dies in that movie too. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, and then he was also in Entrapment.
Oh,
Raj,
Entrapment's a good movie.
Yeah, Raj Singh as the Little Maharaja only had like a couple other credits outside of this, but he's a big enough role in the film that I wanted to shout him out. And then, of course, we also get a weird.
Dan Aykroyd. Okay.
Yeah, we also get a weird Dan Aykroyd appearance here as Weber, which I said to Cameron, I was like, is it a cameo or was he just like a working actor? Because by this point, he had been known for Saturday Night Live. He had done the Blues Brothers movie. He had done Trading Places like the year before this. And then after this, he would, of course, go on to be immediately in Ghostbusters. And that probably like really blew him up.
Right. Yeah.
Spies Like Us, Dragnet, Coneheads, Blues Brothers 2000, and pretty much every other Ghostbusters thing that has come out, he has been a part of. So yeah, it's a weird Dan Aykroyd doing a British accent as Weber. All right. Trivia. We will take it back to All Out of Bubblegum like we did last week for the total kill count here. How many bodies do you think this film racks up?
I feel like less than Raiders.
Yeah, I mean, I will say yes, it is less than the 66 of Raiders last week.
Man, I can't imagine. I'm trying to think because there's stuff where it's like, does that count as a death?
66 people died in Raiders?
Yeah. That's my curiosity. I'm like, okay, if we're counting 66
because it was like 33 Nazis at the end was like a good chunk of that. And I'll say there is a good chunk of this that is thuggy guards dying when the bridge is cut at the end of the film kind of thing.
Oh, right.
I'd probably say 36. I'm going to say 36.
That's a good number. Price is right. I'll say 38.
38, exactly right. Logan nailed it with 38.
Hell yeah.
Also, you have to stop saying your Price is writing it because Price is Right is going 1 over, not 2.
I know, but I didn't want to do exactly 1 over, so I went.
Don't preface it by saying your Price is
Last week I did 1 over. Last week I did exactly 1 over.
So of those 38, I've pulled out specific kill counts for Indiana Jones, Willie Scott, and Mola Ram. How many do you think Indy has this week?
See, it does the thing where like all the guys who die from the bridge, and so that's such a like. I mean, it's probably like 10 to 12 guys. It feels like a bridge full of dudes.
I'm gonna go up to say he's probably took out. I want to say 18.
Yeah, and then it's also like playing the game of subtraction, trying to think how many Willie took out because I feel like she didn't take out that many. So yeah, 18 feels pretty solid. I'll go a little bit higher and say Indy takes out 21.
I think Logan just looked at looked at
All
Out of Bubblegum beforehand because yes, is 21.
Okay, there you go.
Logan is spot on. All right, for Indiana Jones. We'll go through those kills in a little bit. How many do we think Willie had?
6.
I'm trying to even think who she would have killed. She didn't kill anyone at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, she's not armed. She doesn't really. I mean, I'm trying to think where does she even kill people, and the only thing I can think of is during the minecart chase. Like,
but she's not in control or do.
But I don't think this All Out of Bubblegum say like. No, I mean, I would say like she throws stuff out of the.
Well, see, what I wonder, Cam, is because she punches the one dude and then his body gets hit by the cart, and then
and that takes out
off.
that takes out 3 of the dudes. So I think she probably has anywhere 4 to 6.
4,
I would say.
Right? Yeah, I'll say. I'm gonna go with 4.
And I had 6. Okay.
3, but you're both talking about the exact same spot. She punches a guy.
Okay.
He falls, so he dies, but he also hits the other cart that takes out 2 people on the other cart. So yeah, she had.
Oh, it's 2 people on the other cart. Yeah. Okay.
She had 3 kills from that one moment. And then how many kills does Mola Ram rack up in the film?
I feel like he doesn't.
He
whips the guy's heart out. Right.
He has 2, I think, minimum. Or wait, maybe he only has the 1. He only kills the 1 guy by ripping out his heart. I'm trying to think, does he kill anyone else? I mean, more people have to be killed or die because otherwise, how do you get to 38, right?
Mm-hmm. I will say there are other kills aside from just these three people.
Death,
Yeah.
Gotcha.
right.
Okay, I don't think he ever kills like.
So yeah, it's not like he's not the rest of the kills.
Yeah, I'm gonna say he only does the one. I don't recall him killing anyone else.
And my question is if it's counting like him. Does anyone die from the dam going down? Do any of like the henchmen die in that? I don't know if it's counting like that as a kill for him because he like directed them to do it. But I'm not sure if
I don't. Let me see. I don't
Sure,
believe there are any kills attributed to like the flooding of the mine, because I don't think there are like there. I don't think there's a body count connected to that.
I don't know if he kills anyone else, but one feels. I feel like if he only killed one person, Trevor wouldn't include him on the list. I'm going to say he kills 2 people.
He kills 3 ultimately. The one whose heart he does rip out and then he burns. Right. And then in the like bridge sequence at the end, he causes 2 other thuggy guards to fall.
Oh, great shout out! Yeah,
yeah. So that is his 3 kill there. So the rest of our breakdown is the opening sequence. We get 2 kills. Chen shoots Wuhan, and then Indy impales Chen with a flaming skewer of pigeon flambe. is
absolutely
is
skewers that guy. If you're not ready for what kind of movie this is going to be.
Yep. So that's Indy's first kill. In continuing on in Shanghai, Indy shoots a Chinese thug in the car, so that's another kill for him. And then it's pretty quiet until we get to Pankot Palace, where Indy wraps his whip around the thuggy assassin's throat, tosses it into the fan, hanging him and breaking his neck.
Another indication of what kind of movie you're in. That shot.
Then in the Temple of Doom, we get Malaram ripping the man's heart out. In the escape sequence, there are a total of 10 kills. Short Round, who does get his 1 kill here, I believe, jumps on a ladder, causing it to fall to the ground, killing the 1 thuggy that was hanging on. Indy flips 2 thuggy priests into the molten lava. 3 thuggies are killed by the slaves pouring rocks on them. The thuggy chief throws his sledgehammer and hits 1 thuggy in the head, surely killing him instantly.
Well, that's debatable.
I mean, that's what they put in here. Indy fights the thuggy chief and causes his clothing to be caught in the rock crusher, ultimately shredding him. Indy knocks 2 more thuggies off a bridge to their deaths. Then we get the minecart chase, where Indy throws a beam into the path of another minecart, causing it to crash and kill the 3 thuggies on board. And then we get Willie's 3 kills, where she punches 1 thuggy off the cart, and he falls into the other cart, taking out 2 more thuggies. And then we have 17 kills on the bridge. Indy cuts the rope bridge, causing 6 to fall off into the water immediately and be eaten by alligators. 3 more thuggies lose their hold and fall, also therefore caused by Indy. Molaram then causes 2 to fall off. Indy causes Molaram to fall off into the water, where he is eaten by alligators. And lastly, the British and Indian soldiers shoot 5 more thuggies to round out the film, bringing us to our total of 38. Other trivia that we have here, of course, the nightclub in the opening scene is called Club Obi-Wan, as an homage to the Star Wars character. In the fun facts here for Ke Huy Quan, this is his film debut. An open casting call was put out to all the elementary schools to find a young Asian actor to play Short Round. Quan arrived with his brother, not to audition, but really to provide moral support. But he caught the film casting director's attention because he spent the entire time of his brother's audition telling him what to do and what not to do. Spielberg liked his personality, so he and Harrison Ford improvised the scene where Short Round accuses Indy of cheating during a card game. Quan won the role over 6,000 other auditions.
Jesus.
During production, the film was starting to go over budget, and Spielberg went to the writers and asked them to make changes to the script in order to save some money. They removed 1 page from the script and saved $1 million. It was a planned air chase scene using vintage biplanes. The scene was removed from this film, but later incorporated into The Last Crusade, so we'll be back to that next time. Willie Scott screams a grand total of 71 times throughout this movie. The giant thuggy chief is played by Pat Roach, who also played the German mechanic that fought with Indy near the plane in Raiders of the Lost Ark. And it was going to be a running joke in the series to have Roach's character fight Indy and always lose, but his role in The Last Crusade was largely cut, and he would pass before Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was made. In this film, as we've alluded to before, this film or in the U.S., this film and Gremlins led to the creation of the PG-13 rating. Many people felt both movies were too violent for a PG rating, but not violent enough for an R rating. Some believed both films would have been rated R if Spielberg's name had not been attached. The ratings change, according to the MPAA, had been planned as early as 1977, but the release of this movie and Gremlins ultimately fueled the creation of it. The Flamingo Kid was the first film to receive a PG-13 rating, but it sat on shelves for 5 months before being released, making Red Dawn the first film released with the PG-13 rating.
Yeah, it was. I was reading into it too. It was like literally like 3-4 weeks after the movie came out, they created it. It was like very clearly what led to it was these two movies. Not we've had it planned for a decade. Sorry.
Yeah, I think the fact that like there is such a large child contingent within this film as well probably also fueled that of like
that's one of my notes about how brutal. Yeah.
So now we have a few trivia things that I've kind of all grouped together. This is my
fun fact I was going to also talk about. So that's next.
In the basically like nobody was happy while making this movie series of trivia fun facts. In the making of documentary for this movie, George Lucas said that although he originally intended for Temple of Doom to have a darker tone compared to Raiders of the Lost Ark, much like Empire Strikes Back was darker than A New Hope, he admitted that he made it much darker than he intended. Part of the reason being that both he and Steven Spielberg were going through a breakup at the time, and he was, quote, not in a good mood. Spielberg also admitted that although he agreed with Lucas's idea for a darker toned film, he felt uncomfortable with certain scenes while filming them, and would attempt to inject some humorous elements into those scenes, trying to lighten them up. The scene where Indy is fighting the thuggy chief guard with a hammer, and the guard takes the hammer away and tosses it aside, only to have it land on a bystander's head, knocking him out with a comical thud, is a prime example of this scene, quote, lightening up. Steven Spielberg said in 1989, I wasn't happy with Temple of Doom at all. It was too dark, too subterranean, and much too horrific. I thought it outpoltered Poltergeist. There's not an ounce of my own personal feeling in Temple of Doom, end quote. He later added, during the making of Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom documentary, Temple of Doom is my least favorite of the trilogy. I look back and I say, well, the greatest thing that I got out of that was I met Kate Capshaw. We married years later, and that to me was the reason I was fated to make Temple of Doom. Lawrence Kasdan, who had written Raiders of the Lost Ark, was asked to write the script, but, quote, I didn't want to be associated with Temple of Doom, he reflected. Quote, I just thought it was horrible. It's so mean. There's nothing... Excuse me. There's nothing pleasant about it. I think Temple of Doom represents a chaotic period in both their lives, and the movie is very ugly and mean-spirited. End quote. Yes, lots of anger and like just pain and darkness in this one, in a very amusing / terrible way.
It's really interesting.
Go ahead.
Because you almost have to like watch two different documentaries, but like watching documentaries on like the making of like the original trilogy of Star Wars, and then also the making of like the Indiana Jones trilogy, you sort of get kind of the beginning of the cracks in Lucas's sort of personal life around the time that Return of the Jedi is being made and filmed, and just all of the pressure and stress of that movie, and obviously not being able to get Spielberg to direct Return of the Jedi because of some of the obviously issues he had with Hollywood, right, and kind of motion pictures,
all the guilds,
really all of them, and then his sort of like director that he got to pick to do Return of the Jedi ultimately just did kind of a shit job, and Lucas had to basically direct the whole thing. And then he gets here, his marriage is completely falling apart. Spielberg's also in a very dark place, like they've talked about. And yeah, I imagine all three of our critiques are going to be similar to what we've just read, but I think it makes a lot more sense and sort of shows the human side of filmmaking a little bit as well. And sort of, you can kind of see the creators bleed into their works. You see it very much, I think, in this movie in particular.
Mm-hmm. Cameron, anything to add?
You know, when it comes to this movie, I think that there is one I've only ever seen it once. It's actually the film I've seen the least out of all the Indiana Jones movies. Temple of Doom's number one as far as like I've only seen it once, and then Crystal Skull I've seen twice. The other two films I've seen countless times. This movie in particular, there is a lot about this movie that I think has aged very, very poorly. But my initial thoughts about this film really boil down to it is a movie that feels tonally off-putting in several ways. I think that the tone of this movie just bounces between like three different points of it being like dark, like a horror film, to being a like trying to be an adventure film, and then also trying to be a I think it actually, sorry, that third point is I don't know who's supposed to be his sidekick, if it's supposed to be Short Round or Willie, and I feel like it bounces back and forth quite a bit. There's a scene with Willie that I'm just like not the biggest fan of. The will they quote unquote will they won't they scene is laborious. And I think this movie gets in its own way with a lot of these like longer scenes that just don't really fit tonally with the other two things that it's trying to do, which is like high adventure and horror. And then you get like these like weird super horny moments that just kind of are just like a little off-putting at points for me.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd call them super horny, but yeah, like I'll say, and we'll kind of segue into, because that was the last of the trivia, into the general, like, how does it hold up? What do we think? I hate this movie so much. Like, it's not fun. The relationship is incredibly forced, and like so much of what makes this movie suck is Willie Scott is one of the worst characters I've ever seen in a movie. And goes against like everything that should make this adventure. Like, if you do an adventure film and one of the people just absolutely doesn't want to be there, you're not going to have a good time. And
never change that perspective. Like, it's not like she
Yes.
starts off not wanting to be here and then like over time discovers she enjoys it. She always hates it to the very end of the movie.
Yeah. Like the weirdly, and this like I have no qualms with Kate Capshaw, whatever. Like,
No.
I've not seen her in anything else, so I can't say, quality wise, but like what she's asked to do in this movie, scream a lot and just always be at odds and like angry with Indy, just is not at all like it strikes me as, and it is those things like, I didn't know the behind the scenes stuff that had gone on at the time, but yeah, now in hindsight, this absolutely reads like she is written as a shrill, annoying character because George Lucas and Steven Spielberg are trying to like put something out there in the world, pulling from like a bad experience in their own lives, and it makes it just, it's such a. It drags the movie down from like moment one, and so the like she then in turn drags Indy down, because you're also like especially like they're doing a whole bunch here. But if you liked the first movie and you liked the relationship that he had with Marion, setting this up as a prequel is a way to get around why Marion's not in this movie. But it also immediately makes her much less desirable in comparison, and so you as a viewer are just watching being like, why are you even attracted to this Indy? Nothing about her seems like she should be an interesting character to you. And so then it comes back to the thing we talked about last week of like Lucas clearly wanted this to be a more James Bondian character. Obviously, we get a very overt James Bond reference in the opening sequence with Indy's attire. And so the idea that like, oh, he's just going to have a different femme fatale every movie kind of thing. It's like, okay, this isn't a femme fatale, though.
No.
This is the worst of the Bond girls all in one kind of package here of she just screams, she doesn't want to be part of the adventure, and like the only thing that would make that maybe salvageable is if she's like, killed halfway through or something, but that doesn't happen, so she's just there and annoying the entire film.
If she was likable, even if she didn't want the adventure and all that, but if she was likable, she's not likable. At every twist and turn, she shows herself to be just like the absolute worst characteristics of like a female like protagonist. Like her massive insults regarding food. Like, don't get me wrong, like I get there, like, and that's another thing too to touch on this movie. that it's like does not age well is like there's a lot of like just really just like not okay like overtures in regards to food and like what's considered delicacy.
There's lots of racism.
There's racism. Let's call it. There's racism. For sure. There's like extreme cultural like they eat dung beetles and this stuff like
monkey brains.
Yeah, that's
my dad. Like growing up, my dad always told us when he was living in South Africa that monkey brains were something of a delicacy there, because it says nobody ever brought it out in like a severed monkey head. Like it was always prepared, like it's like treated like any other dish. It's just it's a animal part that's sourced from an animal that we don't typically eat. Everything about that scene with like also the guys who are like enjoying it are all people of color. And also let's also call the fact that like the heroes at the end of the film are the British government. Mm-hmm. Like the British regiment comes to rescue Indy. And like they full on call out like yes, we were here to kill savages. They had the coat, the Thudi coat. And it's like it's just shouts so backwards. Also, Kali Ma means like, or Ma Kali means Mother Kali. It's mm-hmm. There's so much about just like that entire like the treatment of like Indian culture and also the beginning of the movie straight up just like absolute like the worst caricatures of Chinese people as the characters for the Indies opposition at the beginning of the movie. Duplicitous, like all this stuff that it's just like I can't, like it's so overtly racist that you'd find it in a 1940s pulp novel. Or like a 1930s pulp novel. You'd expect to find it there. I don't expect to find it in an 1989 film.
84
film. Sorry, 1984 film. It's so frustrating because I will say this, I love Indiana Jones and Short Round in this movie. Short Round as a character just like is so great. And the rest of this movie is such a disservice to the region that it's supposed to take place in. It is a disservice to the character of Indiana Jones. It's a disservice overall. And yet, at the same time, there's moments in this movie that I love Indiana Jones because it's when he's like being an archaeologist or it's when he's being just a good person. There are moments where I just love that about it. So even then, it still like carries it over. When Indiana gets so pissed off at Willie when she won't eat their food in the village, and he's so furious with her, like you're embarrassing me and you're insulting them, and I'm like, okay, cool. And then it's just played for laughs.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I hate that. I hate that so much.
Yeah. It's interesting because you and I were watching it like at our computers here, but like I was maybe a little bit ahead of you kind of thing. And then, I would take a break or something. Like you definitely were laughing at many more moments than I certainly did. And I guess part of that is this was only your second time ever watching it. True. So there's probably a lot of new, whereas I've probably seen it a couple more times. This is also probably the least I've watched. I've probably watched Crystal Skull more than this because I just do not like this movie.
I definitely have.
I will put it out there. The things I laughed at were kind of like the like wild ways people were dying in the mine shaft, or like there's a lot of things about it. Also like Short Round when he's getting up to his antics in the mine and he's like doing his thing where he's like beating up guys and then he climbs up the ladder, then does the whole like everything Short Round, awesome. I love. There's moments where Indiana is like telling off, like when Indy and Short Round are telling off Willie, or any of the times where Willie is told to do something, or not Willie, when Short Round's told to do something by Jones or by Willie, and it turns out to be like when Jones tells him stay up against the wall, and he stays up against the wall, and it causes the trap to come down, and he like. And he's like trying to be angry, and Short Round just says, "No, I'm telling you, like it was your fault." And I love the character Short Round so much. So a lot of those moments I thought were fun. A lot of the action pieces I like in this movie a lot. The plane going down and like the whole like rafting scene I like, even though it's stupid and implausible with the fall and like landing on hard snow and suddenly they're okay. Like that's absolute nonsense.
That was another one of those like. That just screamed a James Bond like action sequence, especially having done that Bond show and like the jumping out the plane and the Union Jack parachute kind of thing. I just had that image of that whole thing. But yeah, the fact that they jump out into an inflatable boat that it's not enough for them just to land there in the Alps or wherever they are. The fact that they then go super out of the snow and just into a forest thing, and then off to a cliff, and then into the water and stuff. It's just all right, this is 2 beats longer than it needed to be, and none of them are good or plausible. I was ugh. Especially because you have Willie screaming bloody murder the whole time too. Logan, I want to throw to you. What are your thoughts on the Bond influences of this one?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, shout out to that Bond show. I mean, I think there's a lot of similarities with the Bond movies on either side of it, actually, in terms of Octopussy the year before and then A View to a Kill the year after. And I sort of feel like it pulled a lot of the worse elements of those two movies. Someone in Hollywood clearly had the Indian vibe in the early 80s because Octopussy takes place in India as well. And I think both are really beautifully shot. I mean, the scenes, the photography they get of India is gorgeous. Some of the sunset shots while they're on the elephants are beautiful. But it's just sort of a waste. And similarly, in A View to a Kill, we get Stacey Sutton, who's maybe the most stereotypical damsel in distress Bond girl, and Ridley Scott is easily a Stacey Sutton, but even worse. I mean, George Lucas, and in particular, even more than Lucas, Steven Spielberg is someone who has always wanted to direct a Bond movie, and I think you see a lot of that put here. Spielberg had actually sort of been briefly a candidate for a Bond film a couple of years prior, actually, and then they just never gave it to him. And the opening sequence is just straight up a Bond pre-title sequence. I mean, almost beat for beat, it is a Bond pre-title sequence. Obviously with the iconic white dinner suit jacket that Connery has in Goldfinger, to even just that whole exchange. And there's another one later on in the movie where Bond and the Prime Minister are talking at dinner. That is such a classic, Bond and the villain are eating food together, having drinks together, and they each know who the other one is, and are just sort of openly talking about what they're actually trying to do here, and not necessarily beating around the bush that much. And it plays so much like that. And I actually like those sequences. I think that probably threads the needle the best in terms of Indiana Jones being a Bond, proxy. And that whole dinner sequence, when it's not trying to do gross out food stuff, I actually sort of like, again, because of that. But I think they totally misread who Indiana Jones is, in terms of his relationship with Ridley Scott and him as a playboy, right? I think Raiders of the Lost Ark and Last Crusade both nail the fact that Indy is someone who is obviously beautiful, incredibly good looking and attractive and fit. And women obviously find that interesting, but is sort of a nerd and almost doesn't get it, doesn't know how to react almost to them, right? That is what made, I think, the scenes in Raiders so good in the school setting, right? He was sort of put off by all of the attention he's getting from the female students. And then his whole dynamic in Last Crusade is just sort of him bumbling around with the femme fatale Nazi there, right? And not being the most suave, super agent kind of guy, right? And here they veer in the wrong direction from the start. He doesn't play it right, doesn't go right. That whole sequence with him and Willie, the movie itself can't sort of commit if it's trying to play it as a comedy or actually as a romantic scene or not.
Yeah, he immediately goes down her dress to try and get the anecdote. And,
it doesn't know what it's doing. And Steven Spielberg in Raiders had said that a lot of the stuff with Marion Ravenwood had got cut because it was basically a character for a different movie. And I would say that's Willie Scott. She's a character from a whole other movie, right? And Cameron touched on something that I, is one of the big positives I have for the movie too, which is Indy and Short Round's relationship. I love. I think it's great. So good. And I think they play off each other really well. And their chemistry is really good. And, I think those are some of the strongest moments of the movie. And then it's that thing of, and then every time Willie Scott pops up, it just kind of brings everything to a screeching halt almost instantly. And I don't think it is Kate Capshaw's fault. I think she was given a character who's basically, terrible, and then told, be a terrible person for 2 hours. And it's like, well, you're going to get what you're going to get out of that, right? I mean, and it's such a shame. It's such a waste. I mean, I almost wish this is a movie that had come out either 2 decades earlier or 2 decades later in terms of its Bond era influences, because I think it would have struck the right balance. It's a bad time to be influenced by Bond movies. As Trevor can attest, this is a kind of a low point in the Bond series. Yeah. And so I think it took a lot of the worst parts of that series and didn't strike the right balance, didn't know what it wanted Indy to be. Having said that, I like the opening musical number to this movie, if only because it's so ridiculous and like out of nowhere, and so much. It is probably literally the most fun the movie ever has, is in this opening musical number that is also from a completely different movie. But at least that movie, has a sense of fun to it, right? Because so much of the movie to me, and I'm sort of happy to see that Spielberg also said it, is that like, it's so subterranean. We spend so much of this movie underground, right? And out of like the fun tropical blue skies environment of Raiders and Last Crusade. And even, I think Kingdom of the Crystal Skull also is a movie that spends a lot of time underground in caves to its detriment, especially in the back half of Crystal Skull. And I think that's not how you're supposed to view an indie movie. And I think when it does that, it just stays in one spot, underground, with no sun. It just sort of really slows things down. Because I even took the note at the end of the movie. It's like, oh shit, we're back outside again. It immediately feels more energetic and not as like lethargic, as we're just making no sort of progress here. And it's just sort of a mess of a movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did find myself saying midway through watching it yesterday, like, oh damn it, I hate that this movie got anything goes stuck in my head, especially because like it's it's the Chinese anything goes that for whatever reason only the words anything goes are said in English.
It's so unbelievable. Like,
yeah, and then it is such a like an interesting. We lose the globe-trotting adventure that we had the last time around of, okay, let's go to this place. Now let's go to this place. And then let's, search for this and which we will get again next time around. And it is largely like, okay, you started in China and then like on your way home, you basically got hijacked and then you're in various parts of India. But I will say like one of the other Bond influences I found myself thinking was the set of the Temple of Doom set kind of thing, in concert with the minecart sequence. Very much felt like the big crazy, like, all right, we're just gonna do a giant set. Ken
Adams influence for sure, right? Yeah,
absolutely. For the James Bond, end of You Only Live Twice or something like that.
Even great shadow. Even the minecart chase itself, literally, again, a year from now, in A View to Kill, the whole conclusion of that movie is in like an underground mine that has a whole mine sequence of Grace Jones trying to get the bomb out. Right? Like, it's so weirdly influenced by stuff that either has just happened or is going to happen in the Bond series. And like one thing we haven't really touched on that I think is really important is that like this movie being a prequel, I would say in almost every single way weakens the movie, needlessly so, because it like, and it's a thing that like wouldn't happen. They wouldn't make it a prequel today if this movie came out, right? Like it would just wouldn't be, or if they did, they'd give it like a proper epilogue. Like they do not address what happens to Short Round in obviously in Raiders, but even in Last Crusade, just never mention of him again. Ridley Scott's like whatever, but like there's so much weird shit happening here that's like, okay, but like this isn't referenced here, like Cameron said last week, and he adamantly does not believe in like magic or religion, where at the end of this movie he's like, Yes, I understand the magic now. Like
I
understand the
says it. Like he literally,
he like summons fire by by chanting. Like he actively embraces the magic of this movie.
He's literally possessed at one point,
which is the weird. Like blood. It's so weird because there's so many things that it's like they clearly like think, oh well, Callie's like the devil.
Oh yeah. Also, shout out to voodoo just being a thing that's also
in here for some
this
reason.
movie completely.
Voodoo's there for some reason, despite the fact that we're talking half a world away from any cultural relevance to it. But like, there's so many like goddamn racist. There's so much goddamn racist shit in this movie.
But to your point, Logan, absolutely. Like because this is set before, and they basically were like
they didn't want to have Nazis.
Exactly,
but, like,
we said
made way more issues by doing it.
We didn't want to have Nazis as the bad guy again. They're clearly going to avoid that and jump away from that for the rest of time. But it also immediately is like, all right, well, there aren't really any stakes for Indy. Like, we obviously know he survives this event to go on to the Ark in his next adventure, kind of thing. So even when he is possessed or the fear of like his heart, Mola Ram pulling his heart out, it's like, we know that doesn't happen. We know he's fine a year from now.
Right.
So yeah, it was just like such a baffling and bad choice.
It's so weird to me too, because this idea that we didn't want to have Nazis as bad guys, so we must therefore put it in the past, because God forbid there are any other villains in the world in 1936 or 37. Yeah. And the entire globe is just like, what are you talking about? Like, you can clearly have bad guys in the late 30s who aren't Nazis. It's okay, guys.
I mean, yeah, that's the thing. Like, you set this movie in 1937 and just tell this entire movie, all of that logic still works. It's perfectly fine that there aren't Nazis in India.
Yeah, it's okay. In fact, like, it's such a bizarre twist, and like, there's a lot to be said, I think, for this is a movie that felt like they had a couple of like ideas, but not a fully fleshed out like script and movie, and they were just sort of, it almost felt like they had like get this movie out in like 18 months, when in reality they had no time and they had no rush. There was no reason to like go over things quickly. Like it feels as like scattershot and like by the seat of their pants as Quantum of Solace does, Trevor, where like it's literally Daniel Craig writing his own lines on that movie during the writer's strike, but it's not. It's just like you had all the time in the world. You're Spielberg and Lucas coming off E.T. and Return to the Jedi right before this. You're fine. Take your time. And like so many weird creative decisions. The special effects in this movie, I think, are weaker than Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like, I don't think it looked as good. And the usage of like back projection is like way more pronounced, particularly in like some of the earlier scenes in the film.
As much as I like the minecart chase, the minecart, the mine itself is very lackluster or interesting.
And I think that is some of the best. That's sort of an indictment of the movie. Like, I think that some of the best special effects is the minecart chase. So that says something, that fact of like how bad I think it is when they're dropping from the sky and then like doing that whole like chase sequence, right?
I think one of the big things that they like pushed for with the effects is one of the trivia things I saw was that the mine shaft flooding is done in miniature, because notoriously like water doesn't scale great. So it's going to look like a giant wave when it's done in miniature. So to help miniaturize the flooding water, as this parentheses, scaling water is notoriously difficult, they agitate the water with several off-screen air jets. The effects of these air jets is seen in elements of the miniature set, like the embedded branches and cords billowing and shaking, which could just as well be caused by the force and rumble of the flooding water. So yeah, it's like that's I think where a lot of the like effects stuff was going for this one. But it also does strike me as like, oh, they weren't. I mean, Lucasfilm wasn't trying to like replicate the stuff, and they were, very tapped out after Return of the Jedi. So this probably was, let's do a less effects heavy kind of thing. Let's do big grandiose sets. Let's do this, minecart chase sequence that we can stitch together and edit together, rather than like, let's figure out how to make a person's face melt again or something like that. So yeah. I think it was probably a conscious like we just pulled off the most effects heavy movie of all time in Return of the Jedi. So maybe let's take a step back and not kill ourselves for the next year to do that again.
They really did do a great job though with the like chest effect of the chest getting like like that, but then the way the chest like heals up, that looked great especially for its time. Like I know that's just like a reversal of whatever the original shot must have been, but it still I thought it looked great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then
also, what a bizarre thing I did not remember from the last time I watched it, that the chest closes back up after they rip out the heart.
Oh, yeah.
And by the way, so about Indy not believing in mystic mumbo jumbo, but then this movie happening, I thought, oh, well, maybe they do it because I remember he gets like they narc him up with with a hallucinogenic, and I was like, maybe that's like he attributes to that. It's like, nope. By the very end, he is completely focused and conscious and being like, I fully, he like the guy says, you understand the power of the rock? And he goes, I fully understand its power. As he hands it back to him, treating it like a sacred object. And I'm like, wild, man. Absolutely wild. Can't believe like this is a thing. It's like, man, there's no continuity with this. And also, there's so much about this movie that I think is really, really cool as far as like ideas or concepts that they go through on this of like the idea of like just a lot of the things that they do is kind of cool as far as like the concept wise, but their execution of it is so dark and dim and racist and extraordinarily an extraordinary misinterpretation of like very publicly available like information. And on top of that, you also had, I was reading some facts about it, the two guys they had to write the script for it, for the treatment for it, knew Indian culture, according to them. So I'm really confused how they got to this point. But also, like, absolute anti-shout out, a quiet down, as it were. A whisper down. We'll call it a whisper down. A whisper down on having the British be the good guys at the very end of, like, we've come with our Indian troops. Ah, yes, killing the British.
I mean, again, like, this is the 1984, like, we're not having this like global re-examination of, hey, the Brits, the British imperialism maybe was bad always. Was not the examination.
1935, right?
Yeah. Like the closest you had to that kind of examination was Gandhi from a couple years earlier, but that movie focused on very different elements of all that stuff. Like, I mean, think Gandhi's about the amount of people like in the last couple of years who got introduced to like the idea of partition by Miss Marvel, or like a Doctor Who episode from a few seasons back. Like it is not a like Western observation until much more recently that like imperialism has been always bad.
I am in my era of anti-imperialism. Like I'm just living
I get it. You're constantly Spider-Punk now, Cameron. I get it.
Spider-Punk is still the coolest.
He
was the coolest before Across the Spider-Verse. He's the coolest now, especially.
I think that I mean, turn into like, I mean, the movie's racist, right? And like Trevor sort of had a like tease on this because when me and Trevor watched this movie 3 years ago.
Oh yeah, I was curious. How did that go?
I had sort of if not forgotten, then never really sort of remembered it, because this is the Indiana Jones movie that I watch by far the least out of the trilogy, right? Like I watch Raiders and Last Crusade all the time. I love those movies, right? And I basically never watch this one. If it's on TV, I don't really care to watch it. Bruce Lee too, like I just don't make time for this one. So like I had gone years before I seen Temple of Doom when I watched it in 2020 with her. And I mean, watching Indiana Jones: The Temple of Doom with my, Indian American partner is a very different experience than watching it as like a 11-year-old chuckle fuck, right? Who doesn't know anything. And so like,
how's that? How did that go?
Yeah, I mean, the movie's racist, right? I mean, like it's that simple, right? And like Shavi will call it out for that immediately, right? And like I didn't watch it with her this time. I just watched it by myself because she was out of town. But like the dinner scene, that's
why we timed it out this way, right?
Right. Yeah. And so the dinner scene in particular is really bad. I mean, Indian people just don't eat those dishes, right? Like that's just not food that is eaten in India, right? Like they don't eat monkey brains. They don't eat a giant snake filled with snakes, right?
I don't think I don't think any place eats a giant snake filled with snakes.
Because that's fucking ridiculous. Obviously, like that's like the whole point. And also, like, not to be like this dude, but like even within the movie's own canon, Indiana Jones is notoriously, infamously afraid of one thing, literally one thing. Just like the sight of it freaks him out. It's snakes. There's a giant snake impaled on a table, which is filled with millions of little snakes that crawl all over the table too. Totally doesn't care.
Yeah,
it's right after he freaks out at a giant snake in the jungle.
Well, they loosely write around that by like that whole like he's at the end of the table having his conversation, and we don't know necessarily where that sequence is happening in relation to him. Could be down at the other end of the table where Willie and Short Round are. But yeah, it's definitely like a bad. One other like just a like racial behind the scenes thing that I did want to I'll highlight here that I could have pulled into the trivia is Dr. Nanayakara, who was cast as the Indian village shaman in the like early village that kind of like sets them on the journey to Pankot Palace, did not speak a word of English. He delivered his lines phonetically by mimicking Steven Spielberg, who was prompting him off camera. The pauses in his dialogue were therefore not for dramatic effect, but rather waiting for his next line. So like they cast an Indian in the role, and rather than like create some role that is like a translator, just like made this Indian speaking person like phonetically speak his lines to Indy. And it's like
Indy kind of speaks Indian. He could have
and there are moments where he does just speak in Hindu.
In Hindu, he speaks in Hindu, and then he also translates at certain parts.
Exactly.
It's like, so that should not have been necessary. That's so messed up.
It is absolutely a thing where they just didn't want to subtitle it, or they didn't want to have that much like language going between like Indy and the stuff. But yeah, it's just like another, like if you make that movie now, he's speaking Hindu too, and Indy is like translating it to Willie and Short Round or something like that, or summarizing, and you know maybe there's deeper stuff there if you speak it or if it's subtitled or something like that. But yeah, it was just like I read that and I was like, why even have that then? Like if you're going to go through that much struggle to like to have, you went through 6,000 kids to find the right Short Round, and you found like the one person that had the exact look you were going for, and you were like, oh, we don't need him to speak the language of the movie. Weird ass choice. And yeah, just like, I mean, the performance is fine, and more power to him for not even understanding what he's saying. But yeah, it was just like I don't. Why did it goes back to like all of those early Bond casting things of like, why do you keep casting people who don't speak the language of the movie?
They just look beautiful,
and you're just gonna dub over them or something like that. Is
I'm not sure, because they also don't really specify. Yeah, so I'm not sure if the language you're even speaking is supposed to be Hindi, if it's supposed to be Punjabi, because it could be either one. And so they don't specify. It's very unclear. Like even the precise location where we're at is sort of generally vague. We're just on the way to Delhi. We're in Pankot, which is like so. Yeah, I mean it's dumb, right? You could definitely have just subtitled this. Indy speaks whatever language we're here in right now, whether it's Hindi or Punjabi. Yeah. And so you could have just had the whole conversation done that. There's another like villager, like the village leader who isn't the shaman, who speaks straight up English.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it makes it even more interesting that they just had this other character. They could have probably just like put his dialogue in that other character, but there's a broader conversation there of like between both that and the Chinese that we get in the opening. Like, are they actually saying legitimate things, or is that just like 1980s very, very bad, very racist kind of like that's what I asked the same question.
Translation stuff. So
I
don't know. Yeah,
because I was just Googling around even of like where are they doing, and like even that, like I mean even the brief Google search I did was very unclear of like what language you're even speaking in Temple of Doom in the Indian sequences, let alone if you're speaking Mandarin or Cantonese or just like bullshit in the Shanghai sequence, right? And so, it's all bad. The one good out of the dinner sequence is that me and Austin friends out here a couple years ago, Renee, who Renee's done one of the pods with, had he hosted like a Lord of the Rings night where like him and his wife basically had all of us watch the Lord of the Rings trilogy and like made like 9 meals, right, for the whole, and basically had us there, hosted meals the whole day. And it inspired some other one of us to also plan like themed movie days. And me and Travia decided to do Indiana Jones, and for Temple of Doom, she fully embraced the dinner sequence. And so she hasn't done it yet, but she has like this whole like Google Doc of like the meal she'd want to do. And it's like a Jello dish for the monkey brains. And so that's the one positive, is that we get to absolutely skewer it by doing another dish. But I mean, the movie's racist. The movie's objectively racist. It leans into the trope of India as a like deeply impoverished, poor, superstitious society. At the exact same time this movie's taking place, like you're having Gandhi march to the sea, and also in a country of, at the time, even let's say 500 to 600 million people. It's far more varied and complex and diverse in this. The movie should have known better in 1984. I mean, this again, especially because like this is in a post-Gandhi world, right? Like that movie came out like 3 years ago when this happened, and it's just disappointing on that front to see it, I think, so utterly fail the location and culture that it tries to do it with. When a James Bond movie from the 1980s does a culture better than you are, you're in serious, deep trouble here. You're not doing things well, and so it's disappointing on that front.
Yeah, I know. I didn't see it when like pulling anything together for this episode, but I know when we've talked about it in the past, like there have been like interviews where it was like, oh, we were like with the dinner sequence, we were trying to like be a parody of the pulp stuff but like if you don't have the context of that, you don't come across as parody, you just come across as racist as fuck.
I think
part of the reaction, speaking of the pulp thing, I think that it's important to also note that this pulp stuff comes from like
the pulp stuff itself was wildly racist. So
that's the key.
Don't
here,
try
right?
and like
it comes
let
from,
that be a thing you're going to leave out of the thing.
Yeah, it goes back to funny if like the colonialist aspect of and look at these places that were being plundered for the resource, that had rich histories and cultures that are blatantly ignored in cultural reference as being these savage lands. And India 100% is treated this way in pulp fiction, like pulp novels, and is like they might have tried to lambast it here, but all they do is reinforce it. And it's an absolute shame.
I think also, if you're gonna parody something, you like you don't watch Austin Powers and be like, this is a straightforward drama. Like you're like, there's a level of like, I think, really going over the top in a parody that is important, especially in a scene like that where you're really threading racial and cultural lines. You gotta be really pin perfect with that parody. And they utterly fail that.
Yeah, the closest they get to that being a parody is that the person who is like very excited for the snake within the snake surprise or whatever is like a very rotund,
right?
Maybe even problematically like brown face kind of person.
Yeah,
like I feel like they didn't put him in a bunch of makeup, but they definitely gave him like facial hair and like eyebrows and stuff. I was like, oh, I feel like this is not good either.
Nope, it's not.
Like
when he
is designed, like he is effectively like the Futurama hedonism bot kind of character in that sequence. But yeah, he doesn't read as parody because we don't get enough of a 360 degree like view of that sequence. So it's just racist and bad.
Or just
randomly eyeball fucking soup. Just eyeball soup. I just remembered that one.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Or just, I mean, to that point, Trevor, it's something to bring up is the fact that we don't really get a full 360, three-dimensional, fully fleshed out Indian character at all. Yeah. Right? No. I mean, they're all either characters of, Indian stereotypes, or they're just straight up evil. And there's nothing between, right? Like the most we get is, the Maharaja, who's a 9-year-old boy who has like 6 lines in the entire movie, right? And half of it he's possessed. And
I was going to say half of it he's possessed, and he's like,
and so I had forgotten he was possessed. Yes. I definitely just remembered him being a little shit. Same. Yeah. And so like, when he becomes unpossessed, I was like, oh, right. Okay.
And he tells Short Round, one clue, you need to get out of here, and then it's ignored and never touched on again.
Yeah. And so that's sort of the thing, is that like we're just not given any, I think, image of like what an Indian character should look like in this world that's even remotely fleshed out. And that's just also disappointing in that regard too, right? Like they're all such stereotypes.
Yeah, it's the same thing also, you could say, with the exception of Short Round. That's the only Asian, the only Chinese person in this movie that is that, and he's clearly deeply Americanized with his New York Yankees baseball cap. And it's very frustrating to see, just on like basically top to bottom every level. Very frustrating. Although I will say, one of the times Trevor did hear me laugh out loud was when the door shuts and the plane turns out to be owned by the guy that is chasing.
Yeah, that great.
That got me. I was like, I did not remember that, and that made me laugh quite a bit.
It's a good bit.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's dive into the report card, where we grade from A+ to F, and then we got some other little bits to do before we wrap up. I'll start first on this one. This gets an F for me. I hate this movie so much. Doesn't even get the like, oh, let's play into the bit of the show and give it a D+. No, it is just an F. This is a bad time, and I knew it was going to be a bad time. Like when we set out on this adventure, I knew I was going to really enjoy Raiders, and I'm really going to enjoy Last Crusade, and I knew this was just going to be a fucking F that was just going to sit here, and I was just going to have to sit with it. So yeah, F for me. How about you, Logan?
Yeah, I think it is. It's really messy. I almost wish I could just hate the movie and be done with it. And I'm really close to. I think like Cameron said, there's like just enough here that almost makes it more disappointing, because I think I do see those flickers of like an indie short round centric story. I see so much promise around that. Like almost if they just stayed in like Shanghai, like what that, like that's also the thing of like there's just never any sort of like conclusion to the Shanghai opening sequence. It just ends and there's never any sort of resolution afterwards. Is also frustrating. The movie is shockingly violent and brutal, especially with its treatment of children. But even outside of that, I mean, a man gets hung from a ceiling fan and it shows the body. A man gets like crushed by like the rolling rock thing, shows the blood smear. A dude gets impaled. Like it is shockingly violent, brutal, and I think just so totally misunderstands what Indiana Jones should be. I mean, I would give it a D. I think it just doesn't get it at all, and it's largely the indie and short round relationship that brings it up for me. But it is such a disappointment.
Yeah. Cam, how about you?
Man, I'm really torn on this because I want to grade the indie short round. Like the things that I like about this movie, I really do like a lot. Like they're really, really good. I think they're true to Indiana Jones as a character when he's doing the professor interrogation of the prime minister. There's so many things about this that I think are just really, really great. And then on the absolute opposite end of the scale, you have everything with Billy Scott. You have everything with the just blatant, outright racism. Like missing the mark just every single time when it comes to that sort of thing. It's harsh because like I want to just say F for racism and have that be done with it, but there's so much I do not want to do a disservice to Ki Kwan or Harrison Ford in this movie, because they do such a great job of elevating what is otherwise an absolute irredeemable trash fire of a film. That I'm going to give it a D-.
Yeah. Right. I will say, because we didn't touch on it at all, but I think it's important for me to say, when Harrison Ford goes shirtless in this movie, he's so
oh my god, he's so hot.
Goddamn attractive.
Oh my gosh, when his shirt, when his sleeve gets torn in that fight, and it's just like, and it's just, and his shirt's like hanging off. He has barely anything covering him on that side of his body, and it's just like,
especially when he like, look, I know he's possessed and he's like hitting kids in the face, but like evil Indy shirtless,
hot. It's
guy,
hot.
like, guy looks great. Yeah.
There, so on that,
Harrison Ford has the perfect amount of body hair. The perfect amount of body hair.
Yeah.
Not too much, not
Back
less.
Actors could still have body hair, just not be completely shaved. Yeah.
It's so perfect.
Yeah.
So I will shout, like there was a lot of trivia in there about like he got himself into probably his best possible shape for this movie, for sequences like that. And then I will also shout out this bit of trivia. While filming the whipping scene, the crew played a practical joke on Harrison Ford. While he was chained to the large stone, Barbara Streisand appeared, dressed in a leather dominatrix outfit. She proceeded to whip him, saying, "That's for Hanover Street, the worst movie I ever saw." She continued whipping him for A New Hope and making all of that money. Carrie Fisher then threw herself in front of Ford to protect him, and Irvin Kershner chided Steven Spielberg, saying, "Is this how you run your movies?" This entire sequence is filmed and is out there. You can watch it. Yeah.
Incredible.
That's insane.
I know what I'm doing after this podcast.
Barbara Streisand.
Yep.
Also, the fact that Carrie Fisher's just hanging around the set, as is Irvin Kershner. Like, what the hell is going on with it? Yeah, what is going on the set, Spielberg?
Yeah. Yes, he definitely in very good shape for what was being asked of him in this film, and no refuting that. But yes,
it's
still
part
does
of a
make
larger conversation. We touched on it last week too, but like it is just this era of movies where like people weren't perfect, right? Like, and we're still a few years out from it, but like the fact that what many people consider arguably the greatest action movie of all time, which is Die Hard, Bruce Willis would never come within 100 feet of that role if it came out in 2023. A like kind of schluppy, very balding man who's just not conventionally attractive, we'll put, as like the headline of this like, giant action film. Just like, this is still in a very different era of Hollywood, and it's really before like Stallone and Schwarzenegger are like fully taking over what it means to be an action hero and kind of making it larger than life. And I just think, like I said last week, the heroes and villains are just people, right? Like they bleed, in Andy's case, a lot in this movie.
Yeah.
And they're just dudes, right? And I think that is to the strength of Indiana Jones as well. So anyway, take us home, Trev.
So for our segments here, we have It Belongs in a Museum. Best artifact. Where do we want to put the Shankara stones in opposition to the Ark of the Covenant? I imagine number 2?
Number 2. They barely show up, and when they do, they're immediately put into a bag and then forgotten about till the very end of the movie.
Yeah.
It's weird,
and it's like,
because,
what was the point of how important they were if he stole them and they were just missing?
The MacGuffin in this movie is so odd, right? Because like the
true treasure is the children. The true treasure is all the stolen children.
It's the kids all along. No, what's odd is that like even the even priest here talked about how the fact that like we ultimately need 5 of these stones. We only have 3. The other 2 are like buried underground. That's why the kids are digging. And so it's like the whole point is that like the MacGuffins that we actually need are never even shown. They're just underground somewhere. We don't really get to them. And he just takes these other ones. He doesn't give a fuck about 2 of them. Just lets them fall to the crocodile lake. Just takes the one back. And it's such an odd, weird MacGuffin. The movie just can't commit to it. Again, it's one of the million issues of the movie. But like, it just can't commit to its own MacGuffin. And like, basically, once they get to Pancot Palace, none of that other shit matters. Now we're just going to be doing evil, weird voodoo shit. Just focus on that. Yeah. And it's just easily second. For our Most Punchables Nazis segment, as we've obviously discussed, no new Nazis in this one. And I had like briefly forgotten that. And ultimately I'm like, I don't even want to consider, like, I don't even want to add any of these villains to a punchable Nazi list. So I'm perfectly fine leaving them off unless we want to expand this to be like, oh, the villains of Indiana Jones. If you did the villains of Indiana Jones, I'm fine with that. Because technically Crystal Skull is they're commie bastards and not Nazis either.
Yeah.
And so I'm fine doing that. And right, like the villain is weird. I mean, like he's better than Dieter, I guess. But I would put, you know, the villains of this movie third, right? Probably. I mean, he's definitely evil, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, he's definitely ripping hearts out and enslaving kids. Those are bad things. But they sort of give you like two other villains before the actual main villain of the movie. Like they give you like the weird Shanghai shit villains and then just forget about them. And then they sort of introduce the prime minister who's like the main bad guy of the movie. But in reality, he doesn't even get killed. He gets like knocked out and then you can see him like getting up later on and then it's just never shown again. And then we get like the shaman. So it's like really odd pacing. It's sort of like what I say sometimes it is a very Bond movie where like when the Bond movies have multiple villains and it's like, but that means like none of them are really that great probably. And it sort of suffers from the same thing here. I think like none of the villains can really be great because we're getting a new villain every act basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, we'll throw Molaram in there behind Belloc and Tote. So put him at number 3 above Dieter.
Dieter.
Just
he's just straight up a Nazi.
German henchman Nazi. Yeah. Our sidekicks adding to the list. We had Marion number 1, Sala number 2, Marcus Brody number 3. We have new contenders Short Round and Willie Scott. Willie Scott, I don't surprise. No, like bottom of all of the list.
Bottom of the list.
Easily, I think we all agree.
Can we put Willie Scott on the villain list?
Make her a most punchable Nazi.
Yeah, she's definitely the most punchable Nazi.
Again, like Trevor said, this is absolutely not to Kate Capshaw's fault. She had absolutely nothing to work with.
Yeah.
The Short Round's really interesting to me. So it's Marion, Salah, Marcus Brody.
Yeah.
He's number 1 for me. I love Short Round so much. Short Round is by far like the best sidekick to me. I love the way that he is an action companion. He is he's the driver. He's your wingman. And also just, he has, I think, the best, so far, I think hands down, he has the best duality with Indiana, where Indy feels like a friend as well as a partner as well as a parental figure, mentor. Right, yeah, like I could easily be like, where's Short Round? Short Round's on his own adventure, doing his own thing. I could totally see if Dial of Destiny. I don't think they've announced that KK Kwan is back for that.
He's not.
He's not. Disappointing, because that would have been an awesing thing to basically have him come back and have him be the new Indiana Jones character. That would have been awesome.
Yeah. If Everything Everywhere All at Once had maybe been timed out a year sooner or something like that. Obviously, there was a bunch of there was the reunion of him and Harrison Ford at D23 last year or whatever, and then obviously at the Oscars. Yeah. So there was very much a we wish we could see Short Round in this new movie, and basically it was sorry, we didn't think of that because
you're dumb.
We're dumb.
I do like the fact that
the world forgot about KK Kwan and he came back with a vengeance.
That it is one of the few things in this world that brings Harrison Ford joy is every time he seems to meet up again. Those photos, it is one of the few photos you will find of Harrison Ford smiling, just absolutely happy each time you see the picture of them together. It's great.
I would say another bit of trivia that I saw was that while they were on location somewhere staying at their hotel, Harrison Ford said to Ke Huy Quan, "Hey, do you know how to swim?" And he did not, and so he just taught Ke Huy Quan how to swim in the hotel swimming pool.
Love it. Yeah.
So
one of the few things that cracks his.
He very much was a father, a legitimate father figure to a young Ke Huy Quan.
I think that for me, Short Round is going to be the most, I think, classic sidekick Indy's ever going to get, in the sense of he's very clearly the Robin to Indy's Batman, right? Whereas Marion is essentially an equal, right? A partner. Same with Salah, same with Brody, right? Those are partners. I think in that sense, he's a proper sidekick. I probably ultimately like Marion a little bit more. So I'd put Short Round second, but I think Short Round's fantastic. There's no bad spot to put him. He's he's easily, him and Indy's relationship is easily the heart and soul of this movie. It is all of the best parts of it, basically. As me and Cameron said again and again and again. So yeah, I mean, I'm okay with putting him wherever he goes.
All right. Off of that, I'll say we'll put Short Round at number 1, with the recognition that, hey, we're at least going to get Marion to pop up in another movie.
That's true.
Maybe
and
that
and Brody.
Yeah. So maybe that will get reevaluated outside of just Short Round's number 1 appearance here. But and then I've just put in Willie Scott as number 99. We're definitely not going to get that many, but she is the bottom of the barrel always, because that character is just terrible.
Just one of the worst characters.
And then I imagine we're all in unison on this being currently number 2 behind Raiders of the Lost Ark in our overall film rankings.
I would agree.
Correct?
Yeah.
Nobody's been hiding like a secret. Nobody's been like harboring a secret love of this movie.
And that's the thing. Like, and I had that thought again while watching it. I think it's died down a little bit, but I remember kind of growing up and like the mid to late like aughts, like people definitely really loved Temple of Doom and like really liked it. I think because it was sort of like the counterculture one to pick. It was sort of the constrained one to pick of like, oh, I love Temple of Doom. It's my favorite. And you know, when I watched it a couple years ago, I was like, it's not good, guys. It's really bad. And then watching it again now, it made me even more cautious. Like, it's not, guys. Like everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but like it's clearly the weakest of the 3 movies. Like it is just so obviously the worst movie especially out of that original trilogy. Like it is just tonally, I think from a script perspective, I think from a direction perspective, I think from an acting perspective, I think from a story beat, like it is just the weakest one.
If someone told me that Temple of Doom was their favorite Indiana Jones movie and then followed it up with because it was before Indy went woke, I would fully buy that is a mindset that some fucking moron who I never want to have a conversation with has.
Yeah, if that's what you're saying, fuck that whole energy. Yeah, for sure.
That's the only type of person I can like in my mind somewhat rationalize thinking this is a good movie, or is a better movie than the others, because it's just absolute dog shit in my mind.
It's the opposite of Star Trek, right? Star Trek, all the even ones are good. Indiana Jones, all the odd number ones are good.
Yep.
We'll see.
We'll see where Dial of Destiny goes. But I will say,
I have a feeling it won't be the worst.
Obviously, I've been and it was very clearly the harshest on this one. But I will agree, like Ke Huy Quan, like there's a reason that like everyone loved him when he came back into the forefront. Yeah. His joy is infectious. He is a delight in this, and his rapport with Harrison Ford is like the only thing that salvages this film. And there are a couple like interesting action stuff, even if they make zero sense. Like the minecart is a fun sequence, and also the trap that they set off and then just have to try and like get Willie to suck it up. Like that is a fun trap that like is the iconic kind of Indiana Jones trap to me. In large part because that's also very clearly what they used as like the reference point for the cue for the Disneyland ride.
It's also I think the first time that he goes back for his hat.
Yep.
Also, it's got a great punchline of like then she sets it off and starts going again, and it never fails to get me to laugh. And it's a great final beat.
All right. Well, lastly, I'll dive into extra credit, other suggestions if you like this. Of course, the other suggestions are Last Crusade, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and Adventures of Young Indiana Jones, and then the 4 other films that we touched on last week: Jungle Cruise, Pirates of the Caribbean, still Dead Man's Chest, still weird that that's the one they went with, National Treasure, and National Treasure: Edge of History, the Disney Plus series. Extracurriculars, I imagine nobody else is watching anything else on Disney Plus right now.
I don't think so.
Okay. I don't think so. All right. Well, that is going to do it for this week's That D Plus show. Thank you, everybody, for joining me and suffering through Temple of Doom with me. You can follow Logan at Lefty Logie, Loggy. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Logan?
Hey, shout out to Trevor Starkey and Kaywood Abbott, just generally, but also for their work on the Let's Play front that they're doing over on YouTube. Cameron's Jedi Fallen Order playthrough. I have to always think about that when I go through it. And then Trevor's playthrough of Tears of the Kingdom, I think you're on now. I think you finished Breath of the Wild.
Yep.
And then they're currently paused just for their own sanity playthrough of Elden Ring. Go check out all of them. They're all very good. They're all very fun, at least for me, because I don't have to play the games. And so go check all those out. They're all great. They're all fantastic. Highly recommend it. YouTube.com/thatnerdsite.
Cool. You can follow Cameron at RevCabot, 2 B's, 2 T's. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Cam?
Yeah, I want to give a massive shout out to, we just did Across the Spider-Verse spoiler cast on Sunday. It was an awesome time. That was, you and I basically got to gush over one of what is probably going to be one of our favorite movies of all time, and talk about just like everything about it, every moment we had from it, and just the great time that we had. So,
indeed.
We had from it. My gosh, I'm out of it.
You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey, and since you guys have already pretty much shouted out all of our actual content, I will just shout out Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Go see that movie. By the time this episode goes live, because admittedly we're recording this a little earlier than we usually do because Logan's been doing some traveling this weekend, it's entirely possible I will see that movie again between recording and when this goes live on Friday. So go shout out to that movie. It is a follow-up to my very favorite movie. So yeah, definitely go check out our spoiler cast on it, as well as the completely Spider-Man unrelated Let's Plays we've been doing. And hey, another thing that we talked about, but then like Indiana Jones kind of swooped in here, but the Sam Raimi Spider-Man are on Disney Plus now, as is like the first Amazing Spider-Man and I think Spider-Man Homecoming. So eventually we're probably going to do some Spider-Man D Plus
Spider-Man
episodes
interview
as well.
What's happening?
So stay tuned for all of that. But yes, go see it Across the Spider-Verse. I hope it makes all the money because it's amazing.
It is.
You can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Thank you for joining us. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other. Class dismissed. And